Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Roundtable. Nice to see you.
You too.
Today, we're talking about color and frequency. And I boned up for 5 minutes via YouTube on physics, so you're going to get some of that. But we'll go ahead and get started. You know, at A Life Design, we have a team of coaches ready to support you in designing your life. Some of the design techniques could be frequency and color. Color has a frequency, music has a frequency. And as you design your environment and where you spend your time, how to lift up your emotions, you know, color and frequency play a part. So let's take a quick look at our magic slides. Okay. And we'll go to present mode. Here we go. Woohoo! So here's some color and frequency. And before we go into the next slide, my research reminds me that Isaac Newton came up with the color wheel when he realized that every color had a different wavelength frequency. And that also helps us pair colors at opposite sides of the color wheel as we see this warm pink and the cool blue. Okay, so those of you who have studied Chinese philosophy or yoga philosophy have some exploration of energy in the body, chi or chakra energy. And if you've done some research, you realize they have colors assigned to them. They have different frequencies. In fact, there's a meditation practice where you start at the lower chakra and with your voice, you say as deep a sound as you can. Lum, 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 lum. And then you work your way up a little bit higher until you get to the very top chakra. Lum, 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 lum. And you actually move frequency and sound through your body as you move through each of the chakras. Let's see. We know that the beautiful churches of Europe are designed to really return sound as people sing, as an organ is played. You know, sometimes people go to church just to be moved by the music. There is a process of singing bowls or of tapping a bowl and then using that sound and hearing the sound inside as a beginning of a meditation. There's a conspiracy theory that modern music was moved to 440 hertz frequency from 432, which is what it traditionally had been, because 432 is beneficial to the human body. But most instruments can be trained to either 440 or 432. And I read that most harps are tuned to 432. Let's see. If you go to WebMD, you'll find out that interior design and color and the psychology of color is a thing, and color and emotions are connected. We have Johann Wolfgang von Goethe to thank for that. He came up with the theory of colors. But when we ask you to know yourself, and I'm sure we'll cover that, you know which colors excite you, which colors you like, which colors you don't like, which colors, you know, are disturbing or too energetic. They recommend in interior design cooler colors for sleeping in a bedroom. There's also a frequency for every single color. And in the color theory, if you do some research around psychology of color theory, you can read about the colors and the emotions they evoke and why in some brands, for instance, in finance and banking, they almost go always with a blue. For some reason, blue is trustworthy. I don't know why that is, but it's true. And brand managers will tell you that. Finally, there's a way to communicate with children or people who are nonverbal with sound. So I saw a cute little Twitter short that had a grandpa playing a harmonica for a brand new baby. And when they heard when the baby heard the harmonica, the big smile and laughing because grandpa was playing a harmonica for the baby. So, the last thing I'll say is in the color theory article I read, it said that different colors of plates will make the food on the plate taste differently. So, think about as you design your life using the frequency and energy of color and sound. Okay, now we're on to our memes. Here on the left, when you clean up your room with music off, sad vacuuming. With music on, disco vacuuming. Yes, let's vacuum to the music. Okay, in the middle, here's the word orange, but the color on the paint chip says tangerine. Here's a tangerine, but the color on the paint chip says orange. And the cartoon figure says, I don't know what to believe anymore. The labels are wrong for the real world colors. I have singing bowls in the background. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. In terms of designing your life, here's a house of cards. And I just thought this was funny. I guess I don't know why I included it. They're on the patio in the back and they say, we've decided to add another deck. Then the very last one, and I know you may have felt this in your life. Officer says, please step out of the vehicle. And the person in the car says, after this song. Like, let the song finish after this song. Okay. And that's that. We'll stop the share. So I know we have favorite music. We have music that evokes feelings and emotions. I was thinking about the taps that was played on a single trumpet at the memorial service for my father because he was in the military. So yeah, different songs. I was rocking out to a rock anthem before we started. So music and color, the frequency, the vibrations in our body, they can be part of how we design our life. As I hand this off to you, Brian, I was hoping you'd tell us the story about playing jazz music for ravens on a beach in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, that's kind of the whole story. There was a day where I did that and they were hanging out. Some birds were
Who
hanging
was
out.
the jazz performer?
I was just playing a jazz playlist and there were some like crows or ravens that hung out for 20 or 30 minutes. They seemed to enjoy it.
A concert
But
for the
yeah,
ravens.
yeah, a little concert. You know, they're vibing with the frequency of the jazz. So yeah, speaking about frequency in general, I do sort of think you can view everything as frequencies of consciousness. This is getting very kind of woo-woo and abstract here, but if you think about like from the standpoint of, in one sense, all you've ever experienced is your own consciousness. Because like, I mean, the world exists, but you only know what you've experienced of it. And you only experienced it in the way that you did. So other people could have gone to the same places, done the same things, but they experienced it totally differently. They had different feelings, different thoughts, different inspiration or lack of inspiration about it. So you have a certain frequency that's either resonating or not resonating with anything. And so there's either harmony or disharmony. That applies to color, sound, I mean anything. And like the, activities you're involved in life. So I do think you can kind of analyze things that way. Like any thought you have, you can look at it like, what's the frequency of this? Do I feel like this is taking me to a higher state of being or a lower state of being, or is it just keeping me the same? Any action you're taking, any people you're hanging out with, anything you're doing at your job or whatever, you can analyze your life this way. And I think it's all kind of in the same realm. But color specifically, I mean, if you change the color of a room, if you paint the walls, put up new art, the whole room can feel different, right? Also, just if you just clean up a room,
Mhm.
the whole room can feel way better.
Mhm.
It's like there's a different frequency to the room
Mhm.
that you pick up on now. There's sort of a lower frequency when everything's dirty, and there's kind of a higher frequency when things are clean. I mean, this stuff does
Mhm.
affect you. It does matter. And again, like if you kind of look at Eastern spirituality, I would say one of the, and I've mentioned this before, like basically one of the core positions is they're taking the position that thought is sort of restricted to a certain frequency band of consciousness, and that the real higher states only exist beyond thought, like states of revelation or deep intuitive knowing, like that only comes in if you go past thinking. So they're really talking about thought as like a frequency band restriction. Like your state of being can only be in a certain level as long as you're thinking all the time. And so a lot of meditative practices are geared at basically kind of getting past that sort of frequency lock, that frequency band restriction of thought. Um, I actually think it's pretty helpful to think of, I don't know, consciousness that way. Um, but I mean, whatever you can do to, I don't know, be in the state of being that you want to be in, or be in anything to elevate your frequency in the sense where you just feel like you're living really well, or you're just in good spirits.
Mhm.
You know, like Dean, you might know the word eudaimonia.
I do know
You
that
know,
word.
yeah, meaning good spiritedness.
Mhm.
That was sort of their word for happiness. Like you're in good spirits, and like anything you can do to kind of facilitate that is a helpful practice. So I also think a really cool thing to think about. I know I'm rambling on a little bit here, but a really cool thing to think about is one way to view meditation is you're trying to see how high you can get your state of being
Mhm.
while doing nothing. So essentially, how high can your state of being be while you're just you? It's not being caused by doing an activity, by eating a meal, by, drinking alcohol or doing something. It's just you, like just being you. Can you find ways to raise your spirits and be kind of in a higher state of being where it starts to feel more amazing, just being yourself? Um, and you can call that raising your frequency. That's kind of like new age language, but I mean they talk about it that way. Um, yeah, another thing we can talk about is there's a saying, your frequency is what you frequently see, right? So this is kind of the idea of having sort of a diet of like the information you take in. So we've talked about this before on ALD. Like if you're taking in a lot of negative news, you're taking in a lot of negative frequency. And then don't be surprised if you're kind of down, depressed, frustrated with the world after that, because you're taking in a lot of these stressful, fearful kinds of pieces of information. So if you frequently see those things, it's going to become part of your core frequency or your core like emotional state. Um, so like kind of having an information diet. Don't take in too many negative frequency types of conversations or news feeds or anything that really kind of lowers your sense of well-being. I think it's important to pay attention to that as we go through different things in life. But yeah, another perfect example is look at like goth culture, right? They wear all black, maybe paint their faces black, paint their fingernails black, and they're all depressed. So it's kind of like there is something to color. There is something to, like, if you just wear black all the time,
Mhm.
that tends to be associated with people who have more of a cynical worldview
Mhm.
or more of kind of a nihilistic viewpoint. There is a certain truth to that. And I think we kind of can all recognize that if you've ever seen goth people out in the wild or, in videos, you can kind of pick up on a lot of these people have a very pessimistic view. And it's associated with always wearing black or dark colors. Like, honestly, if they wore some brighter colors, it probably would cheer them up a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if that was true. Um, yeah, I think sound frequencies are really important as well. Um, we can talk about mantras, like repeating a sound and trying to absorb the frequency of the sound into your whole being.
Mhm.
So one idea is that you don't have to believe this, but one idea is that all the people who have chanted the sound throughout history have kind of added their energy to it.
Mhm.
And so when you chant it, you're kind of picking up on all the thousands of people who have said this. I've heard people say that about the Lord's Prayer or any like common prayer. It's like it starts to carry the resonance and the energy of all the millions of humans who have been chanting this or praying this or stating this over and over. And you can start to pick up that feeling of that, like you're connected into this human thing where like people are really tapping into this frequency. I've been doing a lot of saying the name Yeshua, which is I kind of think that was Jesus is like the original pronunciation of the name. And I feel very positive. I feel really good when I do that. I'll just say it mentally. I feel like it really helps to clear any like negative energies, and put me in a really good state. Actually, in my experience, I would say it puts me in a good spirit more so than in a good emotion.
Mhm. Mhm.
Drawing a little distinction there. But these are things I want to present because I want to give people the options to explore these things.
Mhm.
At a Life Design, we're all about giving people different tools, different opportunities, things they can explore to see if it improves their life. But yeah, like people, like in modern times, people are getting into healing, physical healing through sound, through frequency. Mom, you brought up the Rife machine.
Mhm.
There's stories of people who have healed from that. You can hook yourself up to just a machine that it just broadcasts different frequencies.
Mhm.
And they found that certain diseases respond well to certain frequencies. And they kind of created a chart. And so, like, based on what your issue is, there's certain frequencies that are likely to help you. I've seen studies now, like, they're starting to treat cancer cells with certain sound frequencies, and it's actually showing promise. There is some effectiveness to that. It's
Mhm.
non-invasive. You don't have to do surgery for that. You don't have to take chemo for that, which kills tons of healthy cells.
Mhm.
There's even stories I've seen of like people swimming with like dolphins.
Mhm.
And if they have a disease or some kind of condition, dolphins can start emitting frequencies.
Mm.
And people feel like they kind of get healed from it somewhat. Getting a little more woo-woo there, but
Mhm.
um but they can do frequency ranges that are way outside the human vocal range, like ultrasonic,
Mhm.
very extremely high pitched the frequencies that we can't even hear.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, you know, also like you talked about sort of maybe a negative use of frequencies in modern music, which I do think is true.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's also true about Wi-Fi frequencies and cell phone tower frequencies and all that stuff as well. I've also heard that that was one of the reasons why towns used to have church bells in the center of town is the gong, gong, like the frequency of that echoing throughout the whole town
Mhm.
helped like create some positive resonance, some positive vibrations, and clear out some negative energies. And there is a conspiracy theory that that's why a lot of them were removed. But anyways, um, so that's a big, lot of different angles on frequencies there. Someone else wants to jump
No,
in.
no, that's wonderful. Dean, I want to turn to you, but yeah, first we know that singing bowls and that different kinds of sounds have been used in healing. On YouTube, you could find people laid out on a massage table, and there's different colored bowls, and their practitioner is doing Reiki healing or whatever it may be. So I think there's a lot that people maybe have traditions that have been passed down for 1,000 years, and we're just now cottoning to the actual physics or the actual, we can use sound in some sonic form to break up kidney stones without, cutting into the body. So there's ways that we use sound already. But I know your journal's called Know Thyself, and I think that it's helpful to know what's suitable for you. I have a friend who hated the sound of birds singing in the morning. It just put
Wow.
her teeth on edge. And I hear the birds sing in the morning, and I feel like I'm in a Disney cartoon. Where's Thumper? Where's Bambi? Here, let's go play in the meadow. The birds are singing. It's very uplifting to me. So I think you have to know yourself about what's suitable for you. And I think we find that in art and music with color and sound. I knew an artist who was dating a famous artist who taught art at a university and did installations at famous galleries. And he had bought an impressive piece of modern art from somebody else famous, a big canvas, and had put it in his dining room. She was dating this man. And she finally said, "Could you take that painting and put it in another room? I can't sit here at this table and be calm." It was a very violent art, a lot of slashes of red and black, and it was modern. So there weren't distinct shapes, but it had a lot of emotion and a lot of color. She said, "I just can't be calm and sit here and face that painting. Could we take it out of the dining room?" So maybe it would be an artist that to know herself that that wasn't suitable for her, even though it was expensive and it was a famous artist. Maybe it didn't belong, in the dining room. So, Dean, I think you have some thoughts about sound and healing and color.
Have thoughts about all of these things now all of a sudden, and I don't have them well put together, so I'm just going to
Bring
talk,
it.
say a
Yeah.
bunch of different things. Well, I thought you wanted me to tell my story um of the sound healing experience that I had.
Mhm,
This was probably 4 years ago, maybe five.
mhm,
And I lived in a town where there was a woman who was a sound healing practitioner. And there's like a technical name for this discipline that I can't remember. Like, so if somebody's listening,
mhm,
I'm not, it's a real discipline that has a technical name. I just call it sound therapy because I can't remember the technical name.
mhm,
But, and I was interested in that. And I think I had seen a documentary about the use of sound to cure cancer that Brian was mentioning. I saw that documentary on that somewhere. And I thought, well, that would be interesting. And it was like $50 or something. And so I just thought, well, maybe I'll just try it and see what happens. So I go, and it's kind of like you were describing. It's like a dark room and a massage table, and except I think I took off my shoes, but unlike a massage,
mhm,
you stay fully clothed, and you lay on the table face up. So I lay there, and she came back in, and she then took Tibetan singing bowls,
mhm,
and she just started putting them on my body in different locations.
mhm,
Okay, maybe one on my forehead, one on my chest, etc. And she spent an hour like changing these out, and she had not quite a mallet, but something that looks almost like a is it the mortar in a mortar and pestle?
mhm, mhm,
So except it was like a piece of wooden rod that was covered on the bottom with ceramic.
mhm,
And so she would just like move these around the lip of the bowls. And she would just like go back and forth between the bowls. And of course, I could feel the vibrations and it was relaxing, I guess. And I didn't feel I didn't feel
No
any,
lightning bolts. Mhm,
right, any light bolts, any extraordinary changes. And then until the end, she took all those bowls off and I was just lying there. And then she picked up this little wooden bamboo wood chime
mhm,
and she just stood by my head, and she started to walk around the table, and the chime was like, would move and it would sound. And as soon as I heard that sound, after the hour-long
Mhm.
vibration thing, it was just like electricity just shot through my body. I don't know what I mean, I've heard wind chimes a million times. I don't know what was going on there,
Mhm.
but it was like that sound somehow unlocked something in that moment, and I mean, like my whole body was tingling. One of the strangest experiences I ever had. I don't know how to explain it, but she took it as normal, but for me it was not a normal experience.
Mhm.
um but so obviously something was going on there,
Mhm.
and it's hard to know, like, if it's the sound or the vibration. I suppose the sound is an interpretation in some sense of the vibration.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that was very interesting. I think too, just I I have always had synesthesia,
Mhm.
and synesthesia is like it's an arrangement in the brain where your, like, say your visual sense is you have like a high level of connection between, say, your visual sense and some other part of your brain.
Mhm.
So that you have people who like see numbers as colors or whatever. So that I often, literally with everyone I know, I always see like a color in my mind associated with that person.
Oh.
And I'm not sure that it has any like particular meaning, like gold means this, green means that, whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, but everyone I've know I everyone I know has in some capacity like generates a color in my mind.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting thing, and I'd like to explore that more. I'm not sure what it means. But I guess it speaks to how inherently, as a human being, especially maybe as a sighted human being, color is like an inherent part of our psychological makeup,
Mhm.
right? Like there's a space for it in your brain,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so we can't say it's unimportant because it's part of our design.
Mhm.
Um, I also have had the experience several times of being in prayer and praying for someone and seeing that person appear in my mind, kind
Mhm.
of surrounded by a particular color of light. And if I pray for that person in successive days, that light will sort of change color over time. And
Mhm.
I do know that those things have meanings, sometimes according to, uh, I don't know how energy work has like a whole theory of
Auras. Mhm.
yeah, auras, and I don't know if that's related in some way to the colors associated with the chakras or what.
It
But
is.
I've had that experience of like praying for people and seeing the colors surrounding them sort of change.
Mhm.
And so I just put all that forward as a kind of a first person accounts of kind of the role of color in our spirituality and psychology, and that there's
Mhm.
something going on there that's difficult to articulate. Maybe I just don't know enough about it, but I have had experiences that say it's real.
Yeah.
I think on go ahead.
No, no. I mean, we have these collection of experiences, and sometimes I feel like we're sort of walking through the world in a semi-dark room, making sure we don't trip over the sofa. You know, that there are things that really are happening, but we're not tuned into it, but other
Right.
people are tuned into it. They say with like trumpet players or guitar players or violin players, they can hear that's that's a famous that's a Stratocaster,
Oh, sure.
you will. And so they'll know, oh, that's a drum kit from so and so. That's a brass trumpet, not a silver trumpet. I mean, they have these distinctions where I'm lucky if I called trumpet and got it right. You know,
Right,
like,
right.
I don't know. So I do think our perception of the world, taking that into account, we should design our lives with those things in mind.
And I was just going to talk a little bit too more, kind of more philosophically about what Brian was saying. And I think we haven't really said it, but a lot of what we're talking about is not just color, but the importance of beauty. And
Yeah.
that beauty is a real thing that has a real a real effect on us. And
Yes.
particularly too because beauty is highly associated with order.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when people feel like they are disempowered in their lives, they're ending up getting results they don't want, et cetera, et cetera. They're really seeking a kind of higher level of order. And that I think coaching can sometimes even be conceived as like sort of helping people move into a higher level of order
Mm-hmm.
in their own life and in their approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, Brian was saying, you have goth people, depressed people, or whatever, who are
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with blackness. I've written on Twitter a couple of times about how when I was very depressed as a teenager, I was obsessed with horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there is a lot to say about kind of the vibration, the energy, whatever you want to say, the spirit that different kinds of media bring to you through their visuals and the way they look and the kind of general vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're going to have an entirely different emotional experience watching some black and brown and gray um, tinted horror movie
Mm-hmm.
which is designed to put your body into a simulated stress mode.
Fear and adrenaline and
Right.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's in, well, before I get into that, let me say it. So those films are designed to put your body in a simulated stress mode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, that's what they do, that fear, adrenaline, all that. You're going to have a totally different kind of feeling and experience of life if you're spending your time with that versus, if you're spending your television time on really beautiful nature documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just
Mm-hmm.
going to create something different.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes with your home and your surroundings. I think people often underestimate how much they could improve their life just by cleaning their environment.
Yes.
And that having a beautiful, well-ordered environment and really investing in that is not frivolous and it's not a waste of time. It's a way of like uh, exponentially raising your level of productivity
Mm-hmm.
when you're not fighting your own environment and when the environment you've created actually empowers and uplifts you, you become more productive and more positive, etc. And this is the other thing I was going to say. I think culturally, we part of the part of our cultural problem now is that everything new is ugly.
Yes.
And there's, if you look, it's just if you go to the oldest part of town, the buildings are going to be a lot prettier than they are in the new part.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason for there are reasons for that, and part of those reasons are philosophical. They're a change that has happened in the sort of popular mindset in the approach to our cultural values.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why your post office built in 1840 in some town in the Midwest looks a lot better than your Walmart. And it's
Right.
because the way the Walmart looks
Concrete slabs that are just, yeah.
because the way the Walmart looks and the way the post office looks are reflective of totally different sets of values.
Mm-hmm.
And one set of those values uplifts you, and one kind of wants to reduce you to a consumption machine.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like it works for individuals to kind of curate and cultivate their personal environments, I think a lot of our cultural problem at least there's a big contribution to our cultural problems that comes from just creating consistently inhuman and ugly environments for us to live in.
Oh, I agree. Beauty used to be a default component of sort of how we interacted with the world. I saw on Twitter someone was showing a Victorian door, and when you opened it, the brass plate that held the mechanism had all this beautiful scroll work on it
Right.
that you would only ever see as the door swung open or closed. But whoever did that metal work in the door mechanism, the doorknob, had pride and wanted it to be beautiful. And that's what they did with the inside of the door.
Yeah.
So I do think that we can be making choices like this. We can choose things that we find beautiful. There's a lot more agency in our lives than we realize. And I think as coaches, we help clients determine that. There's a trick that they use in AA meetings, depending on what you're going to the AA meeting for, and you're sort of restoring some sort of control in some part of your life that had gotten out of control. After you've done like 30 days worth of meetings, they recommend you get a house plant. You're not ready to have a dog. You're not ready to care for a bird, but you could manage a house plant. And now you keep it alive for the next 30 days. You care for it, you cultivate it, you admire it, you talk nice to it. Now you're responsible for something outside of yourself. You're not just focused on, oh, poor me, this is really hard. No, that house plant is going to thrive and I'm going to thrive alongside it. Something really simple like that. I think we have more agency. We've talked about Dr. David Hawkins in the past, and he sort of brought muscle testing to the forefront back in the 80s, I think, and for 20 years or so, did a lot of research. With muscle testing, he was measuring the frequency of different emotional states or consciousness states. And he would talk about how high the frequency was of gratitude and how high the frequency was of forgiveness. And so, if you want to change your vibe, your frequency right now, do something for somebody else and be grateful, or decide to get over something that's been bothering you and process forgiveness internally. And how you are oriented now in the rest of your day is different. We've talked in the past about how you can just smile at somebody and change how you feel, no matter how they react to it. Your smile makes you feel better. So smile at a little kid who's jumping in a mud puddle, and it changes your orientation. Your frequency is now higher. So, well, this has been really fun to talk about all of this, and to pay attention. Maybe take a look around your office, your workspace, your kitchen, your plates, and think, is that the right color? Is that the right art? Or maybe I should put some art on the walls. What would be pleasing to me? Or I have that art on the walls because it's famous, but I really don't find it pleasing. I'm going to switch it out. So, we can have some agency about how our lives are going. When you know yourself, you know what feels good in your body, you know what shifts and enhances your mood. Keep choosing those things that feel good, enhance your mood, and help you positively interact with the world out there. So, Brian, do you have any final thoughts? I know we're having kind of a quick one today.
Yeah, I'll address, some stuff both you guys said, which I think is really good. So, Mom, like you were just talking about, yeah, like one of the best ways to get out of a funk or out of a depression is go help somebody.
Mhm,
Go do something nice for someone else.
mhm,
You might not feel like it when you're depressed, but when you go help someone, it's taking you into a different frequency or a different state of being. It takes you out of like ruminating on what's bothering you into a state where you realize I'm helping this person. Like I'm being positive. I'm doing something good. And you see their smile and their reaction and it reflects back to you and it kind of rubs off on you. Like you make them feel good and that kind of rubs off on you and then you feel good. Like it shifts your frequency, right?
mhm,
And yeah, also Dean, like you were saying, I totally agree. There's a lot less beauty in the design of many things in the modern world. A lot of it is just because of capitalist, like consumerism type stuff. Like we don't care how it looks, we just care how it sells and
mhm,
that kind of thing. But it's really wild to reflect on the fact that buildings from 1,000 years ago, where they had no technology, are more beautiful than today. That's crazy.
mhm,
That's so crazy. With
mhm,
all the modern construction, power, equipment we have now, that's crazy. We could be building stuff way more beautiful now.
mhm,
And maybe once in a while we get it in like a super fancy skyscraper hotel or something.
mhm,
But by and large, there's been kind of a movement towards, gray boxes as buildings, or
Mhm.
beige or, I mean, light brown. So
Mhm.
yeah, but frequencies can make a big difference. Like, I would bet that both of you know what I mean. So if you have items laid out on a table, a lot of times you'll have a feeling of like where you want each one to go. And that's what feels right.
Mhm.
That's what makes you feel like you're really ready to work.
Mhm.
You're in a good feeling about it. And it's good. What that's doing, that's shifting the frequency of how everything feels on your table. It's the same thing as like tucking in your shirt feels different than having it loose.
Mhm.
It kind of makes you feel
Mhm.
like you're in a different vibe, like you're in a little bit of a different personality socially when you do that. These are all like frequencies that we pick up on based on everything we're doing, based on how we interact with our environment, how we arrange our environment. All of it affects us. I mean, we're fundamentally connected to everything. We can choose to ignore it, but it's better to like be aware of it and use it to make your life better, right? All
Mhm.
these little kinds of,
Mhm.
detail. So that's what I would add.
How do people get a
Yeah.
hold of you?
Yeah. You can find me at alifedesign.org or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
Oh, cool. Great. Well, Dean, do you have some final thoughts for us?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think part of the way we can conceive of people's troubles is like almost that they get stuck at a particular frequency or frequent or a particular level of growth and vibration or whatever you want to say, and they just get into a loop on that level.
Mhm.
And I know I've mentioned him here before, and I don't want to just be like a big fanboy,
Mhm.
but I have seen multiple incidents where Tony Robbins does a fantastic job of challenging that, right? And like they're on YouTube, anyone can go and see them. Like just Tony Robbins and the way that he works with individuals in his sort of in his what you might call individual coaching sessions that he does. He's just a master of like sort of tricking you into first of all changing your physiological vibration. So he's going to try to get you to do something physically, to move, to smile, to laugh, to and then that like becomes the opening through which he's
Right.
going to
There's a
cognitively.
gap now. Yeah.
Yes, to
Mhm.
push you up
Mhm. Mhm.
that opening. I find that fascinating. And
Mhm.
of course, he's developed what works for him. What works for
Mhm.
him is running around, pumping his fists, screaming, using the energy of the 3,000 people in the room or whatever. But fundamentally, he is a master of like basically shoving people through whatever block they have there at that level to like a whole other level of vibration and living. And so I just reflect on that and think, well, at some level, that's what coaching is, even if we're not all going to have like 3,000 people screaming and cheering for you as you're trying to do it.
Mhm.
But the fundamental process is the same, I think. People can find me at deanabbott.com, at alifedesign.org, or on Twitter at deanabbott.
Wonderful. Well, I love your Tony Robbins story, and I'll find one of those.
Mm.
But I have so much stuff that's going to be in the show notes. You guys should definitely look at all the different things. But the psychotherapist that taught me how to do EFT or tapping, after 20 years, she decided that was the most effective thing, and it's what she does exclusively now for her practice. But there was a way to check your math on whether or not you shifted the frequency. Did you shift the vibe? Did we move past the thing? And so, as an example, and she would teach you, a practitioner, to do this at the end to check your math. And so, let's say you started with someone who said, "My uncle's driving me crazy. I just can't stand it." And so we say, okay, so we start with your uncle's driving you crazy. And we're presenting the problem. And we go through the statements and we work through it all. And then you're at a level 9 with your crazy uncle, and then you're at a 7, and then you're at a 4, and then we're pretty much cleared up. The way you check the math at the end is you say, well, what are you going to do the next time you see the crazy uncle? If you get laughter, it's over. When you can laugh about the thing that you were so frustrated and upset about, and at bottom you're now at laughter, you've checked your math. It's done. This is now added through. We've released it. So I think there's a way you learn to do a vibe check for yourself
Mhm.
and just kind of get to a place of, okay, I've worked through whatever that is. We all have stuff to work through. We have a team of coaches to help. So come find us at alifedesign.org. And thanks, you guys. This was an interesting one. And we'll see everybody next time.